Hello everybody and welcome to the October edition of the Alliance of Independent Authors Self-Publishing Q&A show. And I'm Debbie Young. I'm the commissioning editor of the Author Advice Centre blog. And with me, as always, is David Penny. Hi. Who is a historical novelist, technical manager, and a huge fount of wisdom.
Oh yeah.
So we've had lots of questions in this week. This month rather, and we're going to pack as many answers in as we can, and we've bundled them together this time into broad topics to try and get through as much as we can in the time that we've got available. And we're going to kick off with talking about writing, which is of course where it all begins. First one is an interesting question from Rosemary Ellen Guiley. And she runs an independent publishing house with worldwide distribution based in the United States. And her question is, which version of English should she use? Because until now, she's had all American authors on her list, and they're about to publish their first English, British English author. And she doesn't know whether she should use American spellings or British spellings, or issue even separate editions for the two different countries. What do you reckon, David?
It's a difficult one. Traditional publishers will generally put different versions out in the UK and in America. And sometimes all they do is go and change double quotes to single quotes and italicize, they put a Z in instead of an S and so on. You can do that, but in general, I think if you have an English author who has written in British English, that would be left in British English throughout the whole of the world rather than change it. The trouble is with just changing the spellings is there are other cultural issues, like they call supermarkets in America, that supermarkets are called supermarts, and they use highways rather than A roads, and the one I like is curb and sidewalk instead of pavement. And if you say pavement in America, it means the tarmac on top of the road. So there's loads of things that you have to be very careful about if you start changing it. So I think
you only have to get one word wrong to break the spell as well, don't you? I was reading a book written by an American, supposedly in British English, the other day, and they talked about a bunch of stuff, which we just don't say in British English, and it just gives the game away. It's like it reads like a poor translation then.
Yeah, it does.
Be consistent.
Sorry. You get a lot of, some people say, I get a lot of comments that, complaints that my book is not structurally sound, and that they tend to be written by US readers and who don't realize that it's written in British English, and people get a bit worried that they're not really meeting the market. Basically, I write in British English, I just ignore it.
So to Rosemary,
any criticism.
So then our advice to Rosemary is to go with the author's native tongue, really, whether that's British English or American English or Canadian English or whatever, and to be consistent within that book.
Yeah, I think
even try to publish separate issues is too much hassle and be harder to
publish in English worldwide using the same document. Good.
Now we've got a question from Paul, who's published a non-fiction book 2 years ago. He's got a great review of it that he'd really like to keep, but he's been changing and improving and redrafting the book in the intervening 2 years, and he wonders whether it's worth issuing the revised edition. He says, would it be better to be new? Would it be more appealing to be new? Will just being new make it more appealing to an audience? Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, you know I have my tough love philosophy, don't you, Debbie? That he's asking for two competing things here. He's got a great review that he wants to keep, but he wants to generate a new book because he thinks it will gain more interest. I think both are. He cannot do both, basically. If he generates, I don't think he needs to generate a new book. I think if it's languished for a couple of years and he's a bit concerned about the way it's going, he needs to look at getting his name out there, going on blog tours, doing some low-level marketing to see if that will make a difference to his sales figures, which presumably is what he's talking about. You don't need to have a book that is current. I mean, my first book was published in 2015 and made negligible sales until the last 18 months. And I don't think it's new. I think it is simply knowing how to make the most of what you've already got there.
And I think also, if it's 2 years and he's got the one book, well, he should be thinking about writing the next book anyway, unless he's going to be a one-book wonder. If at the same time, though, if he has found so many things that he could improve in the book that he thinks a new second edition would be much better, then it's probably worth going for the new edition. If you can link a new edition, a revised edition with the original edition on Amazon, so you could keep the review if it hasn't changed. I think if you don't change more than about 20%, you're allowed to call it the same book and keep the same ISBN and so forth. But yeah, Paul, what about another book? Clearly enjoying it. I would look to the next book.
Yes, I'd agree on that. I'd agree on that entirely. Okay, we're moving on from writing now to publishing. This is very logical, Debbie. Thank you for this. Anna Ben wants to know whether it's possible to gain the same visibility for a book on Amazon if she sells it directly herself rather than by publishing it via Amazon's self-publishing services. She'd like her customers to pay her directly rather than using a third party that prints the book and pays her royalties. And if she did that, would she have to register as a business in every country in which she trades? And I think the answer is she would have to register in every country in which she trades. And I don't know what your opinion on this is, Debbie, but I would say the 30% that Amazon are going to take of my royalties is way great value to have. Amazon are the biggest bookshop in the world, and it's where everybody goes to view books and to search for books and to buy books. Trying to compete against that by publishing and selling through your own website is a real uphill struggle. And I think my answer to this is just let Amazon have the 30% and let your book be up on the biggest bookshop that exists, because that's where people are going to go to buy it.
I think selling your book on Amazon, publishing it through Amazon services, and yes, there are lots of other services available which we also recommend you use, but publishing through Amazon, you get such value out of the amount that they take from you. And for anyone who had tried doing both, anyone who has ever tried to sell their own book on their own website, A, as you say, will make very little sales, but B, will create for themselves an enormous amount of administrative work. So every time there's an order, you've got to pack up the parcel, take it to the post office, pay the postage, keep all the records, sell the invoice, take the money. There's so much involved that Amazon just takes all that pain away from you. I understand why people ask this question, because a lot of people feel uncomfortable with dealing with such a big company, and they have political reasons that they might prefer to be entirely independent. But you have to decide what your priorities are. Do you want to sell more books, or do you want to be in splendid isolation in your little corner of the internet with your tiny bit of trade? I think most people will go for the former.
Yeah, and I think the killer part of this question is the last bit, which you have to register as a business in every country. Nowadays, you have to pay tax, particularly in Europe, value-added tax, in the place in which you sell your book. So if somebody ordered it from France, she has to pay French VAT. If she has somebody order it from Spain, the same, from Italy, from Germany, from the UK, they all have different tax rules, and you have to apply to all of them. Amazon takes care of all of this. So that in itself, that in itself is reason enough to stick with Amazon. Yeah, it is. Okay, so next one is.
There are other.
Sorry,
Wilson there.
Yeah.
We're talking about other suppliers being available, and of course, IngramSpark is another greatly valued partner for indie authors, allowing us to publish in print and ebooks and to Bob Wilson has said he is looking for the ideal partner to publish his books with, and IngramSpark seems to be my ideal partner, but their standards for acceptable manuscript seem far too technical for me to meet. What are my alternatives? Well, Bob, don't let yourself be baffled and bamboozled by any technology on there, because although some of the technical terms in there might seem rather extraordinary, actually it's pretty straightforward to publish something through IngramSpark. You just have to read the copious amount of information that they give you on their help sheets. There are also various books that you can read. We've got blog posts on the Self-Publishing Advice blog about how to format books that will be perfectly acceptable as ebooks or as paperbacks for Ingram using Word, which is about as simple entry-level publishing as you can get. It's also very easy to create, very easy once you know how, to create covers using simple free, you can even do it with Word, but wouldn't recommend that, but you can use free systems like canva.com to create covers, and you just have to get your head around that jargon. Really, it isn't that difficult. Once you can Google, you can always look up particular understand. And at this stage in your career, I would just invest in learning a bit more so you feel more comfortable with that jargon, and homing in on IngramSpark because they are great. So don't let the, and they are also very helpful as well themselves. If you get stuck with something, you can message them or phone them and they will talk you through it. They understand that not everybody is born knowing all this jargon. They will help you learn it as well. So don't let that deter you.
Yeah, I mean, and if you find at the end of all of that that you are having problems and you cannot cope with it, then there are full service publishers that will give you the alternative, but then they will charge you not insignificant sums to do all of that for you as well. Yes,
but the technology has been getting easier and easier, and so if you can manage a word processing program, if you know how to use a smartphone, if you can manage that level of technology, you can learn how to do these things yourself, and there's lots of resources out there to help you to learn that. So, right, keep going, Bob, go for it. Right, on to the next question then.
Okay, this one is sort of follows on a little bit. It's from Dawn Reeves, and she's after a printer who could do spot UV color for short print run, and who's happy to work with indie authors. I think the point I need to make there is that almost any printer is happy to work with indie authors. They're happy to work with whoever will pay them to come along and do a print run. She's come up with a great cover design, but she'd like a glossy finish on this spot UV color, and wants to know whether that would be both possible and financially viable. She's looking at a print run of about 500. And I think you've said, Debbie, that the printer's clays would probably almost certainly be able to satisfy these requirements.
Yes, they are very good for doing special. I happen to know that Dawn is in the UK. Clays is based in the UK, and they will do special print runs. The thing with using the indies favourites of Amazon's CreateSpace and IngramSpark and Lightning Source is that they formats and standard print, and they don't cater so much for doing like the little specialist jobs. The question of whether it's going to be financially viable, because we know that Clays would be able to do this for you, as would other smaller book specialist companies. The question is whether it's financially viable. Whether it's financially viable, I mean, for 500, that's a reasonable sort of entry-level print run for conventional printing. Well, depends on how much you're going to sell it for, because you might end up with a book that looks fantastic, but it still might. If it's going to cost you £10 more per copy than it would otherwise, unless you're confident that readers will be willing to pay that £10 more per copy, then it isn't financially viable. So if you're doing it for a special occasion, a sort of special commemorative book for 100th anniversary or something, where you know that it will become a collector's item and people might be prepared to pay a premium, then that is more the route to go down. But be very wary of paying for spot colour and other special tricks, gold embossing or anything, for a sort of a standard market book.
Yeah, I agree. You can sometimes get carried away with the minutiae of a beautiful book and a beautiful appearance, but whether that is financially viable or not is another matter, because even she's saying she's looking at a short print run of about 500. 500 books is an awful lot of books to distribute and get rid of and get paid for. So you're taking a big risk, even if you can get those books for £3 a time, and it would probably be more than that. You're looking at £1,500 investment before you make any money back.
That's true. Yeah, it's all upfront investment. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like designing a model of a car. You could have a car with leather seats and champagne fridge and all the rest of it in. And yes, that would be lovely, and wouldn't we all like a car like that? But there aren't many people who are going to buy one like that, and you have to look at what your market will take.
No,
really.
I think I'd recommend there that she goes with a standard cover, because she has the cover, but it will not have the spot UV color on it, and goes through maybe CreateSpace and IngramSpark, and obviously ebook as well, and see what the market for that book is. And if it becomes, if she makes reasonable sales, then it may well be worth her time to go and look at having a print run done in that case, and have the cover done as she wants it to be done. But to start out with something a bit more, a bit easier to get into, and to test the market to see if it's there for the book.
Yeah, and actually you could get a couple of proofs done via IngramSpark and CreateSpace and get them back, and you might say, actually, those look all right, I don't need that extra colour. Because if it's a fantastic design, then she may not need to gild the lily. That might be plenty.
No. Although I remember I was talking to a trad author at Harrogate Crime Festival, and he said, he said, you've made it when they give you an embossed cover. I know. Those are the days. Okay, so we have a question from Armo Traseski. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's looking for a publisher with integrity to publish my book. One option he's come across is a company called BookLocker, and he would like to know what their reputation is like. This is a question that really we ought to bounce on to John Doppler, because he will have the information at his fingertips. But before we came on air, I looked up BookLocker, and I would probably say they are not the best option to go for, possibly simply because looking at their pricing structure, they seem quite expensive. They will charge you something like $900 just to format your book. So the setup fees are $875, and it takes them a month to do it. Or if you want it expedited, it's $1,199. And then everything else is an add-on, like a hardcover is an add-on. Interior formatting comes with it. So contracts are non-exclusive, and they only give you 35% of the cover price.
There's so many variables, aren't there, to look at, Dave, when
it depends, yeah.
There's so much small print, and this is why we have a wonderful book as part of the ALLi successful self-publishing success guidebooks, called Choosing a Self-Publishing Service, which not only lists in the second half various services and gives them a rating, but in the first half it takes you through the whole process of looking at what all these variables are, what all the different bits and pieces that somebody who is new to self-publishing might not realise just how many different details there are to consider. Now that book has been completely overhauled, and a new edition will be coming out a little bit later this autumn in paperback and ebook. the Alliance of Independent Authors will be able to download their free copy, but you will also be able to buy a paperback, and the ebook will be for sale through the usual channels, and that will be a little bit later this autumn. So watch this space and make sure you pick up that copy. And it's a good book to give you advice not only on specific companies but on the whole process, because then it equips you to make an informed decision and to make your own choices rather than relying on what somebody else says. Book, one of many that we have that will help you to self-publishing success.
Yeah. I think it's a decision that the individual writers take. How valuable do they consider their time? Do they want to spend time writing, or do they want to spend time formatting? And some people are just not comfortable with the technology side of things. And so in that case, it's perfectly justifiable to go and use a third party to produce your books for you. But bear in mind, if you do that, you are giving up some level of control. We have a friend, don't we, who did exactly that and is now trying to get her rights back so that she can republish her books in the way that she wants them to be.
Yeah.
So
These publishing services, there's an awful lot of sharks out there, an awful lot of charlatans, but there are also some very, very good companies, and we have a number who are partner members of ALLi, which shows that they are tried and tested and trusted, and are a real technophobe, as Dave says. Or if you are cash rich but time poor, then that's another reason to use. Even if you can manage all the technology but you just don't have the time, then go with one of those. But also what some people do is they sort of cut their self-publishing teeth with one of those services, and then as they learn more and more, they can then progress to doing more themselves, and that's valid too. And the best companies who provide those services will understand that, and they will feel quite proud that they have raised these authors who can then go off and become independent as well. So on to questions of distribution then, I think, David. And Deborah Bluestein, who writes as Dora Bloom, has got a question about Amazon distribution in different territories. She's got a new novel out printed via IngramSpark, with print on demand for worldwide distribution, but apparently it's not showing up in China. I don't know whether Deborah's got her spies out in China to check that, but it's not showing in China. And although it's showing up in a couple of other Amazon territories, it's saying it's not available for order. I think there's two different issues there. She says, would it parallel with CreateSpace make it more available? And absolutely yes, that's ALLi's party line on that, and we've got several blog posts. If you look it up on our blog, is that you should publish both your print books both through IngramSpark and with CreateSpace, because that will get you the widest distribution. IngramSpark will make it available for bookshops and libraries to order it, whereas CreateSpace will make it universally available through Amazon's website. If you publish only through IngramSpark, then you will often have messages up on your Amazon page saying books out of stock, waiting for more stock, often with quite long lead time, saying you're maybe in 2 to 4 weeks. In fact, you order it and it will come in a couple of days. But if you have it set up on both Amazon, on both CreateSpace and IngramSpark, you don't get those out of stock messages, so you don't lose the customers that might be deterred by that waiting time. China's a different kettle of fish. We're not quite sure to what extent things are suppressed in China. I believe they don't have Amazon in China, and I'm not sure that publishing with both would fix it in China. If anybody knows, if anyone's got insights into China,
I'm just checking actually that Amazon does have a Chinese store, but it has only like 0.05% of the market, and it's Chinese book websites that have all of the trade.
China is a tempting market because of its size, but I think very, very difficult to get into. And I think anybody with a new book out will do more, rather than fret over China, getting into China, would do better to concentrate on promoting their book just everywhere else, really.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're writing in English, your two big markets, to be perfectly honest, your two big markets are the US and the UK. And you need to concentrate on those two before you start worrying about everywhere else in the world. Australia is a good market for English language books. Canada is. I sell worldwide, but I sell 99% of my sales are US or UK, with a smattering from, like I say, Australia and Canada. You know, I think I've got sales in India and Italy and Spain and France and Germany and South America, Brazil, Portugal, but they are negligible. You know, it might be one sale a month there, in comparison to much higher sales elsewhere. So,
I think curiously, Germany is the third biggest market for English language, which is interesting. We're very keen on learning the English language over there. Moving on to Natalie Romer's question, which again is one that comes up occasionally, and will always give the same answer, really. How can I make sure that I'm seen as a publishing company with a catalogue of books on a par with traditional publishers like Penguin, and not to be pushed aside as a self-published author by distribution companies? Ambition, Natalie, to want to be viewed on a par with Penguin. I think we've all got a little way to go before we get to Penguin's level. But the answer there really is to set up your own imprint, I believe. And well, first of all, is to do everything as professionally as a traditional publishing company would do it. So your books should look 100% professional. They should be brilliantly written, beautifully presented, perfectly edited, immaculately marketed, and there we are, you match for Penguin. You're obviously never going to have the same size of scale of operation as a big publishing company, but those are the high professional standards that you should aspire to. If you want to come across as being a publishing company, then it's pretty important that you use an imprint and have your own ISBNs, so that your imprint, by an imprint, that's the name of your publishing company, which could just be you publishing your own books, or you might be publishing books for others as well, but most likely to be just for you. So you can set up your own imprint just by giving your books a publishing name. So for example, mine, I'm Hawkesbury Press, got my little Hawkesbury Press logo there and on the spine, but Hawkesbury Press is basically me trading as Hawkesbury Press. I publish a few other books for friends as well, but basically that's me. But my books would be listed as being published by Hawkesbury Press. Now, anyone who knows me, who knows that that's also the name of the village where I live, you know, there's no no prizes for guessing that actually it's just me, but it does give you that professional image, and also because the books are well written, beautifully presented and so forth, professional covers, then they look professional. And in fact, I was in happened to be in an Apple shop ago, and books came up in conversation, and I showed the very nice Apple man a copy of my book, and he picked it up and said, oh, who's it published by? Hawkesbury Press. Oh, I know them, very good books. So I just sort of smiled sweetly, knowing that it was only me and he hadn't really heard of Hawkesbury Press, but it just gives that sort of feeling, it gives that little professional touch. It's not being dishonest, perfectly ethical to do it, we're not breaking any ethical author codes or anything, but it just looks a bit better than having published by Amazon on there, or Debbie Young Books, which just sounds a bit naff. And so I personally, that's what I like to do. It's not for everyone. Others will say, the other side of the coin is people will say, no, I'm proud of being independent. I want people to know it's published by me, so it's going to be Debbie Young Books.
I think Natalie, I've known Natalie, and I think she does have her own imprint. But the interesting part here is at the end, it says, what would make me sound organised, well presented and legitimate? And the answer to that is to be organised, well presented and legitimate. You don't have to, you won't make yourself sound like it other than being it. But it also raises the question of why Natalie thinks that she wants to be taken on. Well, she probably wants to be taken on a par with people like Penguin because she's having problems with getting her books distributed to bookshops and libraries, etc. And it's not, at the moment, it's not a level playing field for indies. It is very difficult, other than going around and taking your books to bookshops on a one-by-one basis, to get national or global distribution of your print books. It's really tough.
I would say also part of presenting yourself as the professional, behaving like the professional, is to make sure that you behave, that you operate as those big traditional companies are operating with bookshops and so forth. And another book that is worth reading is How to Get Your Self-Published Book into Bookstores, which is another one of our ALLi self-publishing success books. And that we hear of far too many authors who don't behave, who don't understand how traditional publishers operate in relation to dealing with bookshops, and equally within our opening up to indie authors book, that tells you how to deal with festival organisers. There's a little bit on there in bookshops, in libraries, and with festivals and all that sort of thing. And reading those books will give you insights into how the business operates, so you can then emulate their standards. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's what you need to do.
It's almost impossible to set yourself up, because when you think Penguin have a huge number, hundreds, maybe even thousands of salespeople whose job is to go around and visit bookshops on a once a month basis and say, look, these are the new titles we've got coming out. If you're an individual, if you're an indie, you can say that once a year, oh, look, here's a new title coming out. But you haven't got a whole bunch of authors that you can give something, half a dozen books for October and say, these are going to be great sellers come Christmas. Yes. So, like I said, it's a really difficult thing. And I think at the moment it's almost impossible, because you are just one person and you do just have one set of books, and even if you've written 30 books, which a lot of people who are indies have, 30 books is Penguin are probably bringing 30 books a day out, never mind anything else. So it is very difficult.
Yes. Another supplementary question that Natalie's put there is, in her communication with the distribution companies that she's aiming at, is she allowed to include that she's a member of ALLi in her communication? Well, much as we think everybody should be proud of their ALLi membership, and we'll hope you're all putting your little badge on your blogs to say you're a proud author member and all that sort of thing, actually, if you're dealing with a distribution company or a bookshop, most of them aren't going to know who ALLi is, and it's not meaningful to them. It's an alliance of independent authors. It's not an organisation that is a distribution company, or it's not going to add value to them. We know that it's adding value to you as an author, because it's empowering you and equipping you, and giving you lots of discounts and deals and so forth. But that's not, if you go into a bookshop and say, look, you ought to stock me because I'm a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors, you will get met with a blank stare.
So it is difficult.
Moving on swiftly to some other business matters. Very interesting question from Laura Provost, asking about working with illustrators. And she says, what's the industry standard for rights and royalties? Should I expect to pay the illustrator royalties on every book sold, or should I only pay royalties on things like merchandise if the book does well? Well, the illustrator really is as important to the book as the writer is. And as a writer, if somebody was giving you a publishing contract, you would expect to be paid royalties on every book, wouldn't you? And the illustrator should accept the same. Far too often, illustrators are not given the credit they deserve. Sadly, I've seen indie published books where the illustrator's name has actually been left off altogether. you want to build up, if you value your illustrator, you want to cherish a long-term relationship with them. So treat them well, treat them right, be fair to them. If there's a large pictorial element in your books, they're more important than perhaps you might realise.
Yeah, yeah. I'm assuming that Laura hasn't paid any upfront costs to the illustrator, so the illustrator has done their work in exchange for some future payment, in which case, yes, you would expect to pay royalties on every book sold. But what you might want to consider, she asks later on about some key points, some must-have in writing terms to make note of. I'm just thinking about translations. I'm going through BabelCube at the moment to have one of my books translated into Spanish. And their terms are that I think for the first $2,000 of income, the translator gets 70% of that, of the royalties. And then as it goes up, it drops down until after about $8,000 in income, all the money comes to the author and the translator is assumed to be paid in full. So what you're doing by not paying somebody up front is you are agreeing to pay them monies in order for them to recoup their costs. And if you want a good illustrator, then that illustrator has to be paid the standard rate for that work. And if you're trying not to pay them that, then I think you're going to have great trouble. You might be able to get an illustrator to do your first book, but you'll have huge problems trying to get them to do the next one on that basis.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Ultimately, it's down to you to negotiate the individual terms, and it's a two-way discussion. It's not for you to call the shots, and don't be surprised if an illustrator walks away if you say, oh no, I'm only going to pay you X, that's it, no royalties. Don't expect to get on well with the illustrator. Slightly tangential question, which would probably better be our last question, do you think, Dave?
I think so,
about
yeah.
foreign rights.
Yeah.
Foreign rights. Jem Fryer says, I'm attempting to set up a foreign rights deal in the Middle East with a publishing company that have approached me from there. They have asked me to provide a contract. Where can I get a contract from without spending lots of money? Would you caution me in any way about self-negotiating such a deal?
I think you would caution anybody about self-negotiating a deal. I know that Orna Ross and his other people are having sample contracts drawn up at the moment, which are not quite complete, but they should be within a month or two, or maybe towards the end of this year. So that you can have a template contract that you can download, and perhaps there will be one on this. My slight concern about this is that some publishing company in the Middle East has contacted him. I'm always dubious if somebody contacts you saying we have a great deal, or if I don't know Jem and I don't know his books, but if you are not selling in the top 10,000 in Amazon, why would somebody in a foreign country approach you? Because they will only want to approach people who have a proven success record, really. And otherwise, they are probably going to want to charge you money to do something. That's the only thing I would check really carefully. Apart from which, if a publishing company has approached you, they should provide you with a contract. Not expect you to provide them with a contract. That's the standard way of working.
And it's the same really as if the same kind of questions should be asked as if a publishing company in your own country had approached you offering a deal. You would have to be asking yourself, well, what can they do for me that I can't do for myself? What are they going to bring to the game? What's their track record? Are they expecting me to put any money into it? What do I get out of it? What are they demanding from me? What kind of rights? Are they rights to 1 year, 2 year, 5 year perpetuity? You need to be really, really careful and look at what they're asking you to sign away and what you are likely to get. You can ask for testimonials from other authors that they've worked with, do lots and lots of research. But again, we have a book for all occasions. We have a book on how to sell rights in our successful self-publishing series, and that's co-written by Orna Ross and American lawyer and self-publishing law expert Helen Sedgwick. And and that's also well worth reading to give you a general overview on how these things work, and to give you a little bit more confidence about dealing with this as well. So I think we've managed to cover quite a lot of questions across quite a broad range.
We have today, yeah, we have an awful lot.
So thank you to everybody who sent in their questions. Sorry to the people whose questions we didn't quite manage to squeeze in. We may be able to get to those next time, depending on how many we have coming in by then. There will be a tune in from the start of this podcast. It will be kept in perpetuity on YouTube and SoundCloud and elsewhere, and there will also be a summary and a transcript coming out on our blog in a couple of weeks' time. Enjoy this podcast. Wait till you get to the Indie Author Fringe in a couple of weeks' time, which is this in spades, isn't it, David? Do you want to say a little bit about the next Indie Author Fringe?
We've got some amazing people coming to this fringe. Probably the most impressive ones to me are Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith. Catherine Rush she used to be, for about 10 years, the editor of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. So I am just totally and utterly in awe of her, because I had one story in 1974 published in an American magazine, and I never got anywhere near fantasy and science fiction. So I'm really, really looking forward to that session. But apart from that, we've got loads of people. This Indie Fringe is geared towards rights, marketing, and professionalism of being an indie author. So it will answer a lot of the questions that we've spoken about here. But there's 24 hours of great content coming up, starting at 10 a.m. European time, 9 a.m. Is that right? 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Yeah, 9 a.m. UK time. We've got all of the agenda will be going up this weekend, so you can log on to the self-publishing.org website and see the cornucopia of pleasures that we have awaiting you.
And that will all be free for everybody, wherever you are in the world. You can come and join the fun. So David and I will be speaking there, amidst all the other many voices there, and we're looking forward to taking part. So Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for listening. Do send in your questions for next time, and David and I will look forward to answering your questions then.
Great. Yeah. So have a good month and see you next time.
Bye bye.